silence yourself.
I don't even need mine.
So I'll start, and then if you
I'll
sit
sit
there,
there. Yeah,
then what we can do is try that.
that sounds good.
I like your dress.
Thank you. Old Navy is probably $10.
They make great stuff. Ah,
When I'm here,
that would look really cute with like gray tights. It's 6:30.
Folks, if you haven't done so, and if you don't mind, appreciate it. You can sign in, send a sheet up here.
Oh, it was-
We'll get started in a moment. Good, how are you?
Hi Duncan, how are you? Yeah, it's some new faces still. Yeah, that's good. I think they're planning out. What time does it start? 6:30. All right. So we got a few more people trickling in. Did everybody sign in? Okay. We could probably pass it around if people haven't. We got a couple more people to sign in.
I live at 8 Argosy Drive
Okay.
in the corner of North Bailey. My husband, I want to thank you so much for getting North Bailey paved.
Yeah, I know.
We can sit in our family room at night
In your car,
and not hear the speeding cars,
hitting potholes.
hitting potholes. It's
I know.
wonderful.
I think I left some suspension on North Bailey about a month ago.
Thank you very
No
much.
problem.
We really appreciate it.
Yeah, I'm happy that
After a decade of fighting.
well North Bailey.
Yes, it's a marvel.
Yep, all you've been pushing. That's begins navigating unless Brian has a clicker. No. I didn't do it. Sorry.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I thought it went through. I was trying to do it off my phone. Phone's sometimes hit or miss. Doesn't. Yeah. All right. We just about ready to begin after this gentleman signs in. Anybody else lingering? All right. Well, welcome tonight, or welcome back this evening. Just as a show of hands, can you raise your hand if you were at one of your neighborhood meetings? Okay, so good. A lot of return. So for those of you who might not know, we are in the process of undertaking a new comprehensive plan. And while we're undertaking the new comprehensive plan, we have active planning going on Niagara Falls Boulevard. We have active planning happening in the center of town on the old Westwood site and how that's going to transform. So we have a lot happening right now, and our planning department really deserves a lot of attention for the good work that they're doing. Sometimes they're an understated department, but we have a lot happening. Among the things that are happening, we're working to fix a legacy of big box retail and office, single occupancy office environments that really is sort of the economic basis of the town over the past couple of decades. We see the markets changing there. We acknowledge we need some change. We also see a number of changes happening throughout your neighborhoods and the proliferation of different market segments, buying housing and turning housing into rentals in places like Eggertsville. And at the end of the day, our goal has been to start off this couple-year comprehensive planning process by starting right in the neighborhoods and acknowledging that every one of the neighborhoods is very different. So can I get a show of hands just if you were at Eggertsville? Show of hands if you're at Snyder? One of the Gettsville meetings? Swarmsville? Main Transit? Williamsville outside the village? I'm missing Willow Ridge, Elka Creek, North Amherst. Yeah, so what you see here is a smattering of people from very, very different places and neighborhoods that have very different values. Places that want to be treated differently, places that have a different history, places that want to hold on to aspects of their history, aspects of what people like and have invested in, and at the same time see change, but see change in a way that complements the neighborhoods. And that's our goal in this comprehensive plan, is to say the future of Amherst will grow property value, grow value in your homes, grow value in your neighborhoods, because we're going to create spaces that are unique to the neighborhood character that we're working within. We're going to come back and have many meetings like this, more meetings in your neighborhood throughout this process, and we want to hear more and more input as we go through this plan. So tonight you're going to see some results. You may have already seen some results posted. It's all very glamorous. When you take text comments, you post text, raw data out in the hall. Wendy Salvati, one of our consultants, is going to walk you through sort of a summary of what we learned. As you remember, hopefully, there was a visual preference survey as part of that. That visual preference survey was meant to gauge a little bit of character. It wasn't meant to be the be-all and end-all for each community, but it was meant to gauge sort of the difference in what different communities valued. Ultimately, one of the things you'll hear about from me at the end of this meeting will be where we're going next in terms of shopping center rezoning. Because at the end of the day, we have to rezone shopping centers. The market's dead or dying. Places like Toys R Us need a future, right? So I'm going to introduce Wendy officially now and turn it over to her and participate and listen along with all of you. But thank you so much for coming, and hopefully we have a good evening of finding out sort of what we've learned, and we'll look forward to that. Thank you, Wendy.
Hello, everybody. I'm so glad that so many of you came because we worked hard to try to do a good job at those forums. So what we want to do, as Brian said, we want to report back to you tonight. So again, we held 10 neighborhood forums, and they were held between April and May of this year. We had a total of 438 residents attend combined, and both residents and some stakeholders. As Brian explained, the 10 neighborhoods, I think Brian explained, but if not, I'll explain. The 10 neighborhoods were derived using the fire districts. We sat and struggled with how do we divide up the town, and that seemed to make the most sense. So we based the neighborhoods roughly on the boundaries of the fire districts. We used these meetings to gather comments and input, and what we gauged were your likes and your few dislikes and your desires for how those neighborhoods are now, how they used to be, how you'd like to see them in the future. In addition to these 10 meetings that we held, we also reached out a little further. The two of the schools, Windermere Elementary and Forest Elementary, held ice cream socials. So we saw that as an opportunity to get some additional input. So we did the visual preference survey at those meetings. There was also a meeting held with 9 students and youth from the YouthWorks organization to get their thoughts on what they thought about the town. So we tried to take a comprehensive approach at these meetings. We wanted to try to get the most out of each forum. So we conducted 2 activities, as most of you that were there know. We did the visual preference survey. We also did the concentric circle exercise. We also created a neighborhood survey, which asks questions about housing and buildings and other conditions in your neighborhood, and everyone was given a copy of that. And then we also provided additional comment sheets. So after you left the meeting, if you had some additional thoughts, you could hand those in or you could mail them back to the town. So the meetings were held between April 24th and May 31st. We started them in Edgartsville. We had 50 attendees in Edgartsville. We followed that with an ice cream social in Edgartsville. Then we went to Williamsville. 38 people came. That was followed by an ice cream social at Forest Elementary. We went to Snyder. We had 83 people come out in Snyder. Main and Transit, 21 attendees. Then in East Amherst at the Transit Middle School, 28 people attended. We went on to Ellicott Creek, to the Ellicott Creek Fire Hall, where 45 people attended. Gettsville with 45 attendees. Then Audubon the very next evening with 21 attendees. We went up to North Amherst, where 78 folks came out. And finally, we finished the last forum on May 31st, and that was in Swarmville, where we had an additional 29 people come out. So again, a total of 438 people. We collected 325, actually a total of 504 visual preference survey responses. 246 neighborhood surveys were completed, and we gathered an additional 78 comment sheets. I'm going to now turn it over to Kim Implement from the Amherst Planning Department, and she's going to take you through the visual preference survey, what we did and the results of that. Then I will come back and take you through the results of the concentric circle exercise. Take it away, Kim.
Thanks, Wendy. As Wendy explained, I'm going to take you a little bit through the visual preference survey and what we found out with those results. So many of you already know this, but I'm just going to go over what a visual preference survey is. So it's kind of used as an interactive way to gain your input on land use and design preferences. And so you're shown various examples of images, and those have a range of building styles, architectures, design, layouts, that sort of thing. And they may or may not be suitable for the locations that we did these meetings in, but that kind of gave us the idea of what preferences those neighborhoods liked. And so we did this to obviously better understand the preferences in your different neighborhoods, and then more so to inform or validate the Imagine Amherst Plan amendment that was adopted at the end of last year. And so how it worked was there was a series of slides, which you can kind of see an example slide up there, that participants were shown different images, and they were asked to view it for about 20 or 30 seconds, and then they were asked to rate it on a scale from 1 to 5. So 1 was very undesirable, unappealing, I don't want this in my neighborhood. 3 was kind of neutral, and 5 was, this is very appealing, very appropriate for my neighborhood, and then 2 and 4 fell in between those. And so there was 2 ways that people could vote for these images or rate them via text. We had an interactive polling system, and it actually showed the live results on the screen. And then for those who weren't as tech savvy, we also had the paper copy sheets as well for them to fill out. And so we asked participants to consider whether that building could be fit within the commercial or mixed-use areas of their neighborhoods. And we asked for their gut reaction, so it was their preference. Hopefully they weren't influenced by anything else. It was really what they felt about that image. And so we asked them to consider the appearance, the design, but also how it sat on the site, and its height, its size, its scale, that sort of thing. And so once we did these VPS exercises, we first combined and totaled the data. So I told you there was a texting option and a paper option. We had to combine those together to get a total for each image and each rating from 1 to 5. So that was a lot of totaling and adding up numbers. But once we did that, we could help identify the preferences for those neighborhoods. And so if we saw a lot of 4s and 5s for that image, we would assign it a mostly favorable or mostly positive reaction. And that we indicated in blue. And then the opposite, if it was more towards 1 and 2 ratings, which were the undesirable or unappealing, we gave it a mostly negative reaction, which we show in red. And so some of the images actually came out pretty neutral. They were off by like 1 vote. So if they were very neutral, we didn't give them a reaction at all. And so this chart is just a glimpse. There's actually a larger chart out in the hall that you can view after if you haven't already. But this is just a glimpse of how that data was compiled. So as you can see, each image is on the side and the meetings are across. And so you can see those red and blue areas. So that red, again, is the mostly negative and the blue is the mostly positive. And you can see how those range across the different neighborhoods. And we even included the ice cream socials and the youth work event as well. And just to point out a few limitations or some other factors, some participants may have attended more than 1 meeting, and so they may have taken the VPS survey more than once. So we just wanted to point out that that may have slightly skewed the data a little bit. And then another thing to point out is, as Wendy described, the way we broke up the neighborhoods were by fire district, and these are very large areas. So there's very different commercial centers within each one of those neighborhoods. And so preferences for Snyder, where Main and Harlem intersect, may be very different than what Snyder on Sheridan near the 290 is. So we kind of had to take those into consideration and sort of figure out where people may have been trying to, in their minds, locate these types of buildings. And so now I'm going to go into a little bit of the actual results that we found. And so overall, none of the neighborhoods, when they were shown pictures of these larger scale office buildings, the 2 pictures on the left, none of the neighborhoods really liked these larger scale offices. And none of the neighborhoods also preferred the 2 sort of what are classifying as modern style buildings that are shown on the right. And so, none of these were really preferred by any of the neighborhoods. We also showed 2 or 3 pictures that were actually generated during the Imagine Amherst project. They're just kind of concepts for pilot areas that we had come up with. And so the 2 here shown are Gettsville Plaza and Northtown Plaza. And so when these images were shown, it's very interesting because where they were shown, for example, Gettsville Plaza, the Gettsville neighborhood actually liked that image. And same with Northtown Plaza, which is located in Eggertsville. The people in Eggertsville actually had a more positive reaction to that image as well. We did show a few images of multifamily buildings. Mostly we focus on the commercial style buildings, but we did throw a few multifamily images in there. And so we had kind of 2 different types. There was the larger scale multifamily, which none of the neighborhoods really seemed to like. And they preferred what we showed on the right were sort of the smaller scale, duplex, fourplex, pulled up to the street a little bit more, better landscaping around them. So we just got a little bit of a feel for what they preferred there too. So the first 3 meetings we did were Eggertsville, Williamsville, and Snyder. And these were considering kind of the more traditional or more village-like areas within town. And generally they preferred the 1.5 to 2.5 stories buildings, and in the more traditional form with buildings pulled up closer to the street, more walkable friendly, pedestrian friendly. So you can see in the blue, they're very well liked within these 3 neighborhoods. Again, with these sort of traditional neighborhoods, here's a little bit of a difference. So Eggertsville and Williamsville preferred the 3-story buildings, and these images show those 3-story buildings more so than Snyder did. So here's where those preferences sort of started to show a little bit better. So while the Eggertsville and Williamsville, still liked the 3-story buildings, Snyder started to say, well, maybe that's a little too much for my neighborhood. And now we'll move on to the more suburban neighborhoods, which were sort of in the middle of our meetings. So this is Main and Transit, East Amherst, Ellicott Creek, Gettsville, and Audubon. So as to be expected, they tended to prefer the plazas and the office buildings more so. But what was interesting is when we showed plazas, one with landscaping and one without, or one with more green space and one with less, they tended to like the ones with more landscaping, more green space. They're more appealing. Even with a little bit of parking in front, but still that green area. So they tended to like those more, as you can see with the blue versus red, where there was hardly any landscaping or green space at all. Again, actually similar to the traditional neighborhoods, they actually tended to like the 2 to 2.5 story buildings in the suburban neighborhoods, as you can see in the red. There's actually only one area where it was sort of more negatively assigned. And they had kind of mixed opinions about 3 stories or higher. Some neighborhoods liked a 3-story building, some didn't, and vice versa. So we had a little bit of mixed reactions there. And lastly, we sort of go to our rural neighborhoods, which we concluded at the end of the meeting. So this is North Amherst and Swarmville. North Amherst was shown all the same images that all the other neighborhoods were, and they didn't like any of them. Which kind of, gave us an idea. We kind of figured that would be. Swarmville preferred a few of the buildings. They were more of the lower scale office and plazas, but again, tended to dislike many of the buildings. And so this, obviously, even in our concentric circle, which Wendy will explain, they really don't want the development there. They like their rural feel up there. And so I just wanted to point out on our map, in the comprehensive plan, there's really not many commercial centers there identified today, and we wouldn't be proposing anymore, obviously, based on these results. Wendy mentioned we did 2 ice cream socials as well. So at these ice cream socials, they didn't do the concentric circle exercise. They just did the VPS. And they were actually shown a mini VPS, so only half of these images. We tried to choose a range of images, some suburban, some traditional, some tall. So kind of the goal with the ice cream socials was to get additional participation from sort of younger families or a different generation. It's hard for them to attend our meetings a lot with, their busy lives going on. So we tried to kind of get an idea of what the future generations of the town may like as well. And of course, there was some similarities, but there's also a little bit that I'm going to point out that was different, that what they liked. So it was at Forest Elementary and Windermere Elementary, and this just it just shows you that Forest was counted towards Williamsville's count, and then Windermere was counted towards Eggertsville, wherever they were located. That's what we counted them for. So here's where the differences kind of came out. Whereas the neighborhood meetings that we conducted with you guys, mostly, they were more unfavorable of the 3 to 4 story buildings. These younger sort of demographic people at the ice cream socials tended to actually like the higher buildings. So this is a very big difference that we saw coming out in this different sort of demographic. As you can see, most of the blue, where the ice cream socials were, is the positive reaction to the 4 stories, and the red is the negative from the neighborhood meetings. Again, same as the neighborhood meetings, these people at the ice cream socials were very highly favorable of the 2.5 two-story buildings. They actually tended to really disfavor the suburban sort of office plazas sort of thing, and this sort of speaks to what Brian was saying, how these commercial strip plazas and areas are sort of becoming obsolete with this future generation that's coming through. So what are we using the VPS for? Again, it's sort of informing the Imagine Amherst plan amendment that we had completed at the end of last year. But generally, these VPS results confirmed that plan amendment in terms of the different forms of development that they prefer in the various neighborhoods. So again, the traditional, more village-like areas preferred those buildings that were pulled up close to the street, had more landscaping, more walkable, and on the opposite side, the suburban liked the more lower story office, more green space and parking in front. So these were kind of things that came out that we expected too. And I'm just going to give a very brief overview of what was done with Imagine Amherst in the past, just so that you can understand how this VPS relates to that. So again, during this Imagine Amherst process, we came up with a traditional form and a suburban form. So there's the 2 different types that I kind of just described there. So the traditional with the buildings pulled closer, and the suburban sort of with parking and green space in the front. And then in addition to those, we also had looked at Figure 6, which is our conceptual land use plan, which identifies the mixed use and commercial areas in town, and sort of designated a type along with that form for each of the centers. So we came up with 4 types. There's center, corridor, medium scale node, and low scale node. And they sort of have different characteristics, so that's why they were assigned to different places. So that kind of gives developers and other people an idea of, what would be desired in those areas that are more context sensitive to the surrounding neighborhoods. It's not more of a one-size-fits-all as it used to be. So here's sort of what I was describing. We took that map that was Figure 6 in the comprehensive plan. There was red areas and pink areas for the commercial and the mixed use. We combined them all into one color, which you can see on the left. They're all pink now, which is commercial slash mixed use. So we kind of said, well, we should encourage mixed use in all these places. We didn't create any new centers or anything like that. We just took what was there and reassigned them to that pink color. And then we also said, well, we should assign these forms and types to these commercial centers as well. So we created took those pink areas out of that map and created the second map, which you can see on the right, of just the commercial and mixed use areas, and assigned them that form and type, so suburban and traditional, and then the types as well. So this really gives people an idea of the context of those, the scale, how those should relate to the neighborhoods that they surround. So as I said, the VPS generally was supportive of the plan amendment. There may be need for review of a few minor changes, potential changes that we heard from participants based on this. And this would mainly pertain to that type that I was saying, the center, corridor, low scale node, and medium scale node. And you can kind of see that in this chart that we've put together. These are some of the possible revisions that may arise. So something may have been assigned a suburban medium scale node, and now we may be changing that to a suburban low scale node. And that actually would mean probably the height would go down, the intensity would go down a bit. So these are things we're examining, and we'll get into the details more in front of the planning board and the town board as that moves forward. And like I said, any revisions to this plan amendment will go before the planning board and then for a recommendation to the town board as well. So Imagine Amherst is sort of moving forward with a phase 2, which works on the zoning code. That will be informed by this plan amendment and this VPS information as well. And the consultant has already started to assess our current zoning code and sort of going over the problems that may be there and things we may want to fix there as well. And so with the project, it will be concluded in the spring of 2019. And I think that's all I have for the VPS. And Wendy's going to get up here again and talk about the concentric circle for you guys.
Okay. So why did we do the concentric circle exercise? As the supervisor pointed out, the town is moving toward updating the comprehensive plan for the town. So we felt that it was important to provide an opportunity to residents and others to tell us about the various aspects of their neighborhoods. We wanted to identify issues and opportunities based on that community input. And we wanted to evaluate the geographic similarities and differences across the town. Some of that, Kim has already pointed out, came through the visual preference survey, but we also saw things with the concentric circle exercises. We wanted to establish some foundational elements that would assist with the future planning and the updates to the comprehensive plan. And then also, as Brian pointed out, we wanted to establish some what we call civic infrastructure to allow for continued public outreach. We saw this as a start to hold these meetings, and it's the town's desire to continue that, to continue to get the public participation and input. So how did they work for those who may not have been there? We took at each meeting, we broke folks out at tables of 8 to 10 people. On every table there was a worksheet with markers. The participants were asked, they were also given maps of the neighborhood that would assist with your thinking and as we went through the questions. Each table had a facilitator that was there to guide the discussion as we moved through the various aspects of the exercise. And we had each table then, after it was done, we gave folks time to go through each aspect of the exercise. Then we had every table report back. Picked a spokesperson, and they reported back to the whole group. So everybody could hear what others were thinking and what was happening at each table. So on this sheet that was given for every table, and you can see a picture of it on the screen, we asked everybody at each table to tell us 4 different things. We wanted you to tell us about your neighborhood as it was in the past. You know, a lot of times we talk to folks, how long have you lived there? Tell us about what it was like when you first were living there over the years. And then tell us about what your neighborhood is like now. Then we talked about what folks desired for the future. And finally, we asked one question, and that was if you could change, implement, or improve one thing in your neighborhood, what would that be? And all of the comments that came in, they were interpreted and recorded by the facilitator on all of those sheets. So every night I got to go home with a big roll of sheets. After 10 meetings, I had a lot of sheets, and I sat and I took every one of those sheets and I recorded all of that data. So all the comments and the results from all the large sheets were documented, as Brian said, in a boring but informative written narrative. The results from each meeting were analyzed so that we could identify common themes, common issues, common opportunities. So I looked at all of that data. And then I summarized all of that data into individual sheets for each community, which are posted on the walls out in the hallway. So if you haven't looked at that, you might be interested in looking at that. And then I also put together a general overall, looking at the 10 meetings, what were the common things that came out of those 10 meetings. And all of these results were then given back to the town so that they can use them in their future planning efforts. So, next slide. So, looking at the common themes from all 10 meetings, the things that were reported from a historic perspective, people want to preserve their community character. They want more trees, keep the trees. They'd like to see larger undeveloped lots, larger residential lots. I'm sorry, let me restate that. Historically, people spoke about the community character in their neighborhoods. It was friendly, it was neighborly, it was people liked what it was in terms of it overall character of the neighborhoods. There were more trees. There were larger residential lots. They liked all those things. They also said that the neighborhoods had less traffic, they were quieter, and neighborhoods were safe. From a current perspective, everybody likes the schools, and everybody felt that there were good services and amenities provided by the town. There was also a lot said about access and convenience, that people felt that they had no problem getting out to a store, getting out to available goods and services. Looking into the future and asking people what they wanted to see in the future, lots of people spoke about more pedestrian improvements, connections, trails, getting more walkability, or the ability to bike and hike and that. There was also a lot said about growth management, that they wanted better or less development, but they wanted development managed better. In terms of the common things, looking at all 10 meetings and that question about if you could change, implement, or create one thing, what would it be? Here's what we heard. And these are sort of in order of what we heard the most of down to what was still important, but said maybe less times. But the top thing, common theme, was better pedestrian safety and sidewalk improvements. And that was followed by more bike paths, bike lanes, and trail connections. So all over the town, people were telling us, we want to be able to get out, we want to be able to walk, we want to be able to bike, we want to do it safely. And that we want the sidewalks improved so that if we're in an urban environment where there are more sidewalks, that it's still safe and we can get around. And if we're out in a suburban area, we want those bike paths and the connections to Clarence or connections within the town itself. People felt that it was important to try to get a better control of traffic. They wanted less traffic congestion, better traffic controls, whether that's turning lanes or traffic signals or whatever, and they wanted people to drive slower. They wanted speed reductions. We heard a lot of that, whether it was Harlem and Main Street or whether it was Campbell Boulevard up in North Amherst. That's what people were telling us. Infrastructure improvements, sewer, stormwater drainage, roads. They felt it was important that the town address some of the infrastructure needs. Again, growth management, less and better development. That was a common theme. In some places, people talked about if we are going to get new development, fill in the gaps, fill in the spaces, so that infill development. Also, fill up the vacant buildings before you're building new ones. Lots of people talked about that. Preserving and protecting community character across the board. Street lighting. We need street lights or we want more street lights. Improving walkability and bikeability, again. Utilizing traffic calming measures to lessen congestion so that it's safer to get across intersections or what have you. Preserving green space and trees. As development moves forward, think about what things look like now, and is there a way through that new development to keep the trees and preserve some green space, kind of save that identity of place that people have. Need for more parks and recreation and parks improvements, that was mentioned. In some of the more urban communities or those around the university, address absentee landlords, issues with student housing, and better property maintenance. And then finally, in those places in the southern portion of the town, establishing throughway access at Young's Road. So there were lots of common stuff that we heard across. So what does this information mean, and what was it telling us? The input and the common themes that came out of the concentric circle exercises support the existing goals and objectives in the town's comprehensive plan. For the most part, those goals are still valid. The town will go back, they will review and update them as needed based on the input that came out of this public participation. The information also highlighted geographic differences throughout the town, which is going to be important as the town moves forward with its planning efforts, because it will allow them to plan in a more focused manner for these neighborhoods. So for instance, Eggertsville wants aging infrastructure to be improved, and they want commercial revitalization in their older commercial nodes. Snyder and Williamsville want community character protected, and they want improved walkability and traffic calming. Swarmaville wants more infill development rather than greenfield development. North Amherst wants to maintain its more rural character, and they want growth management. East Amherst and Main and Transit want more bike paths and improved traffic flow. Audubon and Gettsville want traffic improvements, and they want the revitalization of Gettsville Plaza. And Ellicott Creek spoke about the vacant properties and absentee landlords, and they would like to see that addressed. They also want pedestrian and bike safety improved. So how will the town use this information? It's going to be used, as we said, in the future comprehensive planning efforts to better reflect the current issues and opportunities that were identified around the town. Portions of the updated comprehensive plan may be more geographically focused so that it takes into account the various neighborhood desires and characteristics. The neighborhood forums were also just the first step in gathering input from the public regarding future different neighborhoods, the futures of the different neighborhoods, and also the town as a whole. So more public meetings and opportunities will be held in the future as we continue this process. So before I bring Brian up to close, we presented a lot of information to you. You saw graphs and charts and pictures and things. Where can you find all that information? It's all available to you. If the information and the results of the neighborhood forums is located on the town's website. You can go to that www.amherst.newyork.us and then search the keyword Imagine Amherst. And that's going to lead you to documents that are located for the neighborhood meetings. And you'll find the neighborhood maps, the concentric circle summaries, the visual preference survey summary table, and also a copy of this PowerPoint presentation. So with that being said, I really want to thank all of you who participated in those forums. Your input was invaluable to the town.
All right, if you would, can I have a help with a thank you for Wendy and the planning department? They really have done a lot of work on this. It was important to me early on that we engage a planner who has local ties. Wendy's planning office is located in Clarence. She's a member of the Clarence Planning Board. She's done a wonderful job, really kind of embedding herself in the information we saw. I sat in the back of the room as well, so I could see how small the graphics were. My apologies. If you would like to look at any of those when you come up at the end, I'm happy to go back to any of the slides. When you sit up front and those screens loom over you, it's a lot different perspective. I also would like to mention, because he walked in during the presentation, but our Assemblyman Ray Walters here. So thank you, Ray, for coming and listening to what the town is discussing. Ultimately, the big question is, hey, where do we go next? And a lot of you are probably wondering, where is this thing headed? So as you can see, we've got some existing web infrastructure. We've got an existing project that's funded it's called Imagine Amherst. It's a holdover from last year. We've recalibrated and kind of ditched the committee that we had doing Imagine Amherst. We're going to work with a couple of members of our zoning board, our planning board, our town board, and start to look at the zoning of shopping centers. And so tomorrow night, we're having a meeting with that sort of regrouped committee to look specifically at the zoning of shopping centers. So questions about, hey, will this include housing projects in my neighborhood? No. Questions about, hey, will this change or impact, Westwood? No. Hey, will this change or impact, hotels in my neighborhood? No. This is specifically about shopping centers, and we're going to keep that project moving forward as a rezoning because we know we need to. Second, look, we heard information, and while we're enveloping it in our comprehensive plan, it's already informed our CIP that I'll be presenting on the 15th here. Our CIP is our capital improvements project. We vote on it every year. Stuff that was priorities got backed off. Stuff that wasn't a priority may have come online. Many of you probably have already seen, but based on our early results in Eggertsville, it was clear that we needed to have a town presence in Eggertsville. We wanted to have specifically a presence that brought the opportunity for law enforcement to have a stake in that neighborhood. That helped in our decision to move forward with the police training center on Bailey. You'll see that we worked hard to help the county get to auction this year the property that sits vacant with the old Pizza Hut at Bailey and Cleveland. That hopefully will be turned into townhome style housing, something along that lines that helps benefit Bailey Avenue, nicer, higher end homes. We are looking, we shifted some priorities this year and really focused on reinvestment and infrastructure. North Bailey has been paved, and I no longer have to worry about my car suspension driving down that road. We are aiming at stormwater infrastructure in those communities. We scheduled project in it's down Delwood and Statler and those areas. It's a big green infrastructure project that will separate stormwater from sewer. So we will no longer blow the manhole covers off of Sheridan Drive up in the air under geysers of water, and hopefully fix some problems in basements. It's an interesting area, Eggertsville, because of the way it engages the escarpment. Water flows from one house, gets pumped to the other house. The bubbler then pushes it to the next house, to the next house. It's time to fix that. We also know that Statler and Delwood Park need reinvestment. We simply can't take away, park amenities for the sake of trying to cure problems that we have in the community. So we are going to be using that green infrastructure project coupled with another project in parks to really target that area. We've put projects in the capital improvement plan to fix problems that we have at facilities like Central Amherst Little League, Matthews and McCarthy, a lack of restrooms at the soccer fields on North French, and Garnett Park, which needs some reinvestment in its baseball diamond, and Royal Parkway. That park has got some more attention coming to it. We also have begun, although we haven't planned or don't have property available to us yet, but we've begun to look at a way to incorporate some of the former paper streets and collect properties in the main transit area south of Main Street between Main and Worley to give that community park space that it currently doesn't have, and to create playground areas for children to have safe play place. We are also going to be working with the Water Authority to rectify water pressure problems that we face in that area. And at the same time, we're working with Maine Transit Fire Company and Senator Rasenhofer on converting or enlarging the Maine Transit Station 2 and formally dedicating that area as parkland that's currently yard. In Swarmville, we've committed to finishing the Dan Lake boardwalk and improvements at Dan Lake. We have met with the owners of the compost facility to stop truck traffic on Dan Road and shift that traffic to Smith and Millersport exclusively. We'll be working on improvements at the NARC, at the North Amherst Recreation Center. In sort of the Gettsville area, Williamsville proper, we're going to be looking at improvements on sidewalks along I almost said North Forest, but along Hopkins Road, specifically near the Clearfield Library and near Clearfield Community Center. And we're going to be targeting projects, I'm skipping some probably throughout the town. One of the biggest projects is going to be obviously working through New York State DOT to push for changes on Niagara Falls Boulevard, as people in Willow Ridge have the right to anticipate that that boulevard will be a suitable main street for their community in years to come and is not currently. So there's a smattering of how we've already conformed our CIP budget based on results we've heard from here. There's probably other items in there that I've missed or neglected. If you're really interested, come on the 15th when I present the capital improvement plan, and I think you'll see some of the results that people have been asking for in their communities brought up there. So with that, we're going to take maybe a couple of questions, and then I'll let everybody kind of come up, and hopefully one of the planning department will be out in the hall, and we can point to stuff and have a conversation out there with Kim or Wendy or Dan Howard, our planning director. So are there any big kind of pressing questions somebody would like to ask? Yes. Westwood. So Westwood's been an interesting topic. First, people have heard me make this joke before, but in my office we've got a swear jar, and if you say the word Westwood, I'm telling everybody you have to put in $1. It's Amherst Central Park. We are currently working on a plan called a local waterfront revitalization plan. That's a contract between the town of Amherst and the New York State. A couple years ago, when I was the mayor of the village, we were able to work with our Assemblyman Ray Walter and our Senator Mike Rasenhofer to dedicate Ellicott Creek as an named inland waterway, which gave us the ability to do this type of plan. And contiguous open space and recreation parcels are considered a appropriate portion of that boundary area. That's the vehicle that we're using to work on Westwood along with other portions of waterfront. Ultimately, we have buy-in from the development community, Mensch, or former Mensch partners who own that property, and they're at the table working alongside and within our committee to figure out basically how do we transform that center parcel in the town of Amherst into an appropriate park space, and at the same time acknowledging that there are some development opportunities along Millersport. How do we do that and do it correctly so that we don't have the sort of the broadcast of heavy development within our neighborhoods? So we're going to be looking at that project over the next 12 months. There's public meetings that's going to be scheduled for our inventory and analysis stage sometime probably the first week of December. It'll be on the town website. It'll also be in the Bee. We'll have Amherst Bee articles, and I'm sure a Buffalo News article and some of the local television stations may pick it up. but that'll all be it'll be out there through all of our normal media outlets. But our website's the primary way to do that. Yes, ma'am. Oops. So the Niagara, the NFTA has for a long time been working on the direction of light rail and how light rail might get from South Campus to North Campus. They're currently working through a seeker, which is an environmental quality review for that. The town of Amherst has persistently stated, along with the town of Tonawanda, that the preferred alternative or the direction, if that comes, that we would like to see is not down Millersport, but rather down Niagara Falls Boulevard, up Maple into the campus, and keep the traffic and transportation in our commercial sector, where we certainly have a need for some revitalization. So we expect that the NFTA will follow our recommendations and shift any potential rail in those directions. But the long answer is, it's a hugely costly proposition that's not currently funded. Well, that's not for us to decide. Our job is to fix Niagara Falls Boulevard and places like the Boulevard Mall with or without light rail expansion. We still have to fix those areas. Ma'am? Well, I don't know. I mean, what we're trying to figure out. Yeah, so the question was, I said that there's potential for some redevelopment on Millersport. We see a hotel there currently, right, that the prior town board awarded. That property's being redeveloped. We've had some conversation with the school districts about the need for an indoor sports facility for soccer, year-round athletics. That would be something that would be appropriate to combine with our athletic complex. No. Again, the primary focus on Westwood is recreation. The town owns a tremendous amount of property between Maple and Millersport. UB owns a tremendous amount of property there. If we're going to do expansion of anything, it would probably be in that facility. We have a lot of unknowns, right? How a park, if you. Well, we have developers with development interests in that area. So we have to figure out how to make all that work. Again, we're in inventory and analysis stage. All we're doing is collecting data on what Westwood is, how big it is, what we could do with the properties, we're so. First of all, we're a little off topic. That's an LWRP question, and I'm really not prepared to get into the technicalities of how all that could work, because we are doing a very intense inventory analysis right now, and that's exactly where we're at, is doing inventory analysis. And so by December, we'll have some idea about that. Well, we won't have any plans. Again, so we have an active committee that's been working on the project, and what they're doing is straight inventory and analysis, figuring out what exactly is in that area, and that dial has yet to switch to what should come in that area. The first time that we'll talk about what should happen in that area will be at a public meeting in December. Towards the end of that meeting, we'll start to ask the question, what would you like to see here? Okay. Jim?
You mentioned shopping areas, centers.
Yes.
I've been confused about, are we going to
No. No, we're not creating any new shopping centers. We have existing shopping centers, like Tops, that shopping center on Main Street. We have existing shopping centers like plazas on Sheridan Drive. Those shopping centers were zoned and created for single-use retailers. A lot of it was based on big box and national chain. We need to rezone so that we have something that people could build towards the future and reface some of those shopping centers to see redevelopment. No problem. Sir? Monday, October 15th is the capital improvement plan rollout. Yes. Sorry. 7 p.m. There's some other public hearings, but it'll be on the agenda for the board meeting. Right here. It's during the normal Town of Amherst board meeting. Ma'am? Okay, so some of you have already, and I'm not going to get into the debate tonight about whether or not we should deal with the peanut line, but we put out feelers about that project. We are also, through that LWRP, looking at the connectivity of the trails around Ellicott Creek and how they connect and what they connect to. The Westwood site would obviously be an important link in trail networks if we decided to do something with it. Amherst State Park trails are an important component of that. We're looking at those, but we're yet to commit to projects, right? So when I modified our CIP, we wanted to get projects that were ready to come into a bonding next year, and we're looking at design projects elsewhere. As far as pedestrian access, we did add a pedestrian route on Casey Road, actually creating a complete street on Casey, appropriate bikes and pedestrian realms to our capital improvement budget for this year coming up. We also are modifying the pedestrian bridge at Audubon along the Audubon, the road itself. Audubon. We are also having a meeting about Sweet Home Road. Some of these streets, Sweet Home being one of them, they're roads that we don't have full control over because they're county or state roads. But similar to Niagara Falls Boulevard, we've opened up conversations about a slew of pedestrian challenges that we see faced. All right, I'm going to take one more question in the back of the room, then we're going to go out to the hall, and I'm happy to stick around and try to answer more questions. Ma'am? So there's a two-part answer to that. First, the Imagine Amherst project is going to move forward only to do the rezoning of shopping centers. The most likely homes or housing created there would be in mixed-use facilities, which we would anticipate would be ADA accessible because we're talking about second and third story. And you know that's code-based, and that's building code-based solutions. When I mentioned townhomes, that was specific to a specific intersection. But as we look at multifamily housing or even single-family detached housing, I've invited at the last meeting of we have a very strong disabilities committee. At the last meeting of that disabilities committee, I invited them to participate in the comprehensive plan to make sure future land use includes opportunities for people with disabilities, for all people to have better access. So We're going to thank you all for coming tonight. Again, I appreciate the feedback you may offer from here. I'll be out in the hall, and I'm sure Dan would be willing to go back to some graphics here. Most of those graphics are in the hall if you have any questions. Thank you all.
Sure. I see you had a stack of papers, and I'm a retired teacher, so I know what that paperwork's all about. But our group in
Is there a
Snyder
certain slide you
said
want?
that we would like
You want a certain slide?
Me?
No. You want to look at a certain slide? Or
No, I don't think so.
I could just put we wanted to have input on the zoning.
Yeah.
So what time frame would be appropriate to suggest input? Can I just write something up at some point and just send it?
Dan? Right, but he might be able to answer
Yeah,
your
the-
question. Dan? She's asking what would be the appropriate time for
Our Snyder group said that there was construction going on behind us, that there were a lot of issues with the zoning, the time, the noise, all that. And I personally offered, when can we offer to look at the zoning laws of the town? And how would that all fit in here with the planning? I mean, you know, if we're going to have construction going on, we have to have corresponding laws to support those kinds of activities.
So part of the comprehensive planning process will be to look at the code in its entirety. And that would be the time that we could start to address some of the.
My problem is I go to Florida in the winter and I just kind of wanted a time frame. So can I just submit something in writing, maybe a suggestion?
Yeah.
And that would be the best thing? I don't want to be left out with my
Of course.
opinion on it.
Yeah, I would just
We
send
did
your
talk about it.
send your thoughts
Sure.
to the planning
I can
department.
do anything online and long distance. I
Right.
just won't be here. for
Right.
the meeting.
Yes. Yes. You can submit
appreciate it.
anything you want anytime.
I didn't want to
the
bring it up
planning
because it
department.
obviously wasn't in this
Right.
part of the agenda.
Yeah,
Okay,
you-
I appreciate that.
Yeah, you can.
I'm not on Grand Island. No, I'm in Amherst. That's why I'm here. I'm just.
I have agenda. That's what we're trying to do with this is historically the transportation board that's it's, you know, you've got an international airport, you've got a throughway, you've got transit road that goes to Buffalo. Oh, exactly. There was an article in the Nature. But there was an article. Thomas Frank. Yeah. This is interesting. This is historical stuff. Well, that's in Maryland. They did the survey work back there in 1772. Because they worked for George Washington and yes, they're it's the family. His brother, his two brothers. Can I have one of your cards?
Well, I'm looking.
Oh, isn't that something?
I do University Boulevard.
You know Ed Rath?
I have a degree.
I hope you have one. That's good. That's good. But you're with the company. Oh, that's good. I like what you're doing. You have to expose yourself. What you're doing. Planning.
Airport is the little town there. It's on the canal. Yes,
Oh, I bet.
it's got dynamic clearing going on. And it's,
Good for you. Yeah. Sure, sure. Bearport, is that where, who's the, no, Beckman. But I think they used to live there.
don't think they
My sister and the kids went to school with Colleen and Nicole. Yeah. Oh, isn't that something?
my mom didn't marry anymore. So when the war ended, he was on the West Coast. Little hot planes from Rochester all the way up to the West Coast. They came back on the same train from Wayne.
Isn't that
They had
something?
chatted, and some years later, Mom wrote to him. He said a little note that what he said.
Isn't that something? Really, he started that thing in the 1890s, I think. Did you are you going to this thing? I think you should. We're working on a
This is, these are follow-ins. I went through like 3 people. Okay, well, then thank you for possibly this. I think, I'll tell you this, Mike, I'm excited because see if we chance to finish up that project. I know people had a lot of problems with it. Outcome of that project. For PR. I think that question. We're always short. Well, this was helpful. I hope I will. I think it's a good strategy. Hey, Kim? Ready, go. Jim, talk to you later. Sorry. Okay, no rush.
You're still on. It's a gray man.
Oh, shit.
Oh, it's okay. I was okay.
How about this though? You want this?
No, she's looking for the figure 6.
Yeah, the green man.
Well, yeah, it would be
It's in there.
there.
Yeah.
Very small, but it would be here.
I was just curious if it still exists. This shouldn't. Or I don't think it should.
What is it?
So you're talking about these? These pink
Not
ones?
the old man.
These ones? Pink?
It was just a little tiny. Oh, wow.
You can't see it.
He's a baby.
That's a different route.
I got my Medicare.
Here's Klein.
So the ones on my tiny one.
What are you looking
Seemed like it was in the,
She said,
it was in the walking trail area near Landing Creek. They must extend lines. It's not possible anymore.
Right, those like five houses in there. That's
That are like.
yeah. So that's in this area here. And I mean these are the two big
tiny.
ones. Well,
Little
it's
tiny.
definitely not there. So.
But it just shouldn't
Yeah,
exist anymore.
I was thinking these.
It's like not logical for it to exist anymore. Polygon.
I don't see it.
your Klein?
Yeah, that's what I said.
Well, the original plan was because it was in there. And this is from,
Oh,
I was involved in the master.
Yeah, I don't think it hasn't been here since I've been here for sure. So.
Right at Klein. Klein
Right at
Forest.
Klein across
Yeah, no.
and to extend.
Near
you
the
can't-
center house.
You can't, sort of.
Yeah, right? Yeah.
And that is the geographic center of town, right? Near Hyman.
Not commercial.
Yeah. What used to be a.
I'm gonna say that.
It
I'm gonna
used to
tell you.
be a mixed use little.
It's not on there. I can't tell. I
I was
won't
wondering-
stand here and tell you. I can't say off the top of my head. It's not on
In
the
your
plan.
new gray man.
Well, no, it's not
It's
identified
not
in
on
our
the plan.
map.
You know what I'm saying? Like there are places in town that have
Argent
are
Argent
shown as
Center.
red on here, which
Right.
you're kind of hoping they would go away. There's
Yeah,
little
I don't think
vestiges of
there
old
is.
It's probably
I was just proposed,
I don't think
and at that time,
I would say that's
plan
not.
was extend the road. It's like, what, through these. Happened,
No.
so I.
Yeah.
think it's
Good
gone.
question.
I think it's gone.
When I made. It's how,
It probably got out in the last round of planning. Yeah. Great, thanks for coming. Okay, so we're leaving those up?
Till next Tuesday.
Sure.
Just let people read. Let people write on it.
Sure.
I mean, that's how, there'll be more people in this building in the next 2 or 3 weeks. Just gonna shut this down.